It doesn't have to be a big book, But what I want to do is have them printed up, many books. I want to just pass them out to all my families. And I thought, this is what I've been wanting to do for a long, long time, And I just feel like that all my children, and I've got a few children, got a lot of grandkids. I've got grandkids, more grandkids, step grandkids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I want. I want each one of them, the family, to have a book, and I guess I'll have to publish quite a few. But I'll scatter them out to whoever wants them.
Awesome.
I was a full Navy captain.
That's great.
A captain in the Navy is the same as a bird colonel. They looked at me for admiral, and guess what? I did not become an admiral. They looked at me.
Really?
And so forth. So I asked them, I said, well, what do you think? They said, well, we're not going to make you an admiral. I said, okay, that's okay. But I worked for the Naval Academy. I was head of about a third of Texas, and I was the head of boys and girls. Girls didn't come in until about 72, 73. I can't remember what it was again. But before that time, only boys went into all service academies, Army, Navy, but then girls came in, And I can never forget the mothers with their daughters going into academies, naval academies, and it was very interesting because boys did not accept. It's hard for them to accept, having been, in Naval Academy, and so all that time, only boys only, and then girls started coming in. So mommies were having some problems. I guess the daughters were having problems. So I had to kind of straighten some of that out. That's what I did. It was interesting. I talked to a lot of mommies and girls too. Well, it was just a matter that the boys were not accepting girls coming into the Naval Academy because they'd never been there before. They were kind of reacting to that. So it all got straightened out. So I put in lots of girls and boys alike into the Naval Academy, but only Navy. I didn't work with Army or anybody. Well, I was in the Army for high school, for junior college, But I didn't want Army to draft me, and I picked out Navy. Yeah, that's what I did. I spent a little over 30 years with the Navy.
That's fantastic.
That's my life. I'm a junior from my dad. First name is William. The middle name starts with a J. It's Jasper, Jasper. And I never liked the name because all of his friends, this was when we were during World War II, and we were fighting Germany and Japan and so forth, and all my dad's friends, and he had friends and friends and friends. And I'd be with him, very young, and they wouldn't say Jasper, they would say, hey, Jap, J-A-P. And I said, and I cautioned some of them to call him, if they call him Jap. I said, I don't know, okay, Anyway, I remember that. And my last name is Meek, M-E-E-K. No S, it's not Meeks, it's Meek. And junior. My dad was senior. He was senior and I was junior in Fort Worth, Texas.
Right here.
I was born at home. I didn't get to the hospital. April the 9th, 1933. I'm 92, and I'll be 93 down the way. I was 5 years old, and I was in a class, first grade, and I have a very vivid memory of my mother coming to school to check on me, and I was not in the class. And so she asked somebody, maybe the teacher, where is my son? And she found me. I was sitting in another room, and the best I can remember in sitting there is when my mother came in. I was sitting there with a book, crayons, so I was coloring. And my mother says, what are you doing? Are you having fun? I said, oh, Mother, I'm having fun. I'm having lots of fun. I'm coloring stuff, I was by myself, not in the class. She did not like this. She said, well, come on, so-and-so. I can't remember what she called me then. It might have been Jasper, it might have been Sonny, or whatever, Bill came along about age 19. I did not like Jasper, and I did not use that name anymore, and that's my middle name. And so, anyway, I went with my mother. She took me before I know I had to be in the middle of the class because I know my mother must have disturbed the whole class. And she told the teacher, I don't remember all this. I just had visions of this. But I think she told the teacher, don't you ever do this to him again. Because I was sitting there by myself, not in the class. I was just, maybe I wasn't active. Maybe I didn't know how to do it, but I was 5 years old. I was just barely in the class. And my mother did not like it. She did not accept that at all. I was put back in the class, and she said, you keep in the class. To this day, I've never been put out of the class anymore. Now, what if I was acting up? I have no clue. At 5 years old, I just had the vision of my mother coming in there and telling me, what are you doing? And I could see that she was unhappy by myself. So that stopped. In first grade, I don't know if I was in Fort Worth. I think I probably was. Might have been outside of Fort Worth. I don't remember exactly where it was. I can't remember. But that's my vision. But I don't have a real good collection. But I do have a recollection of her coming in there and taking me out of it by myself and put me, said, you come back. And we went in the class, and I think I realized that she had talked to the teacher. He belongs in the class. This is where she was not happy, and I didn't realize her actions and so forth. But I guess I had an idea of it hit me that she was not happy with me being by myself. I was by myself. When she found me, I was by myself outside the class, somewhere else, just doing coloring. And I have a very vivid recollection of that, but it's just vague. It's very vague. But it was that did something to me. It really did. That stayed with me. I had a young sister. She was about 2.5 years younger than me. Okay. Beautiful, red-headed, and boy, she was a real. I miss my sister to this day. I miss her, and she married some old boy and went to California. And she died in California. It's been years and years and years that I haven't seen her. Mary Louise at the time in Meek. That was my only sister. I was older and my sister, and that's my family and my mother and dad. My mother's family was a big family. Had a big piece of property. You know what Whitesboro, Texas is? Where Sherman, Texas is? Uh-huh. Go west, and about 40, 50, about 35, 40, 50 miles is Whitesboro, Texas. Whitesboro. And my mother's and her parents had a big farm there, and they later sold the farm and moved to town. But that's where I grew up on their farm. Well, I didn't grow up. I mean, we lived. I think we lived outside of Dallas. My dad became a CPA. He was a big tax person. I picked up real quick. I knew a little bit about taxes, and I used to do my own taxes. But one day, I remember my dad, and I remember what my dad said. He says, don't ever ask me to do your taxes. And I think I know why. Because I probably knew how to finagle. And he didn't like that, so he would not do my taxes. So I used to do my own taxes. So I learned it all from my dad, He was a big tax man. He was a big CPA, He was very smart. My dad died at age 67, which was not good. The problem with him was he smoked all of his life. He smoked long before he should have been smoking. And my mother didn't like that. So my mother finally told him to smoke outside. And he did. He'd go outside, And my mother and dad stayed together until he died. And she stayed on, and she died in her late 80s. She didn't quite get to 90, but she was in her late 80s when she passed away. But mother and dad are buried up in the family practice, right outside of Whitesboro, Texas. She was a good mother, And I look back and think about when she found me by myself in that outside, And I guess I've got realization of the fact that she was not happy with me being by myself outside of that class. And growing up, I wasn't the outgoing guy, for a while. But as I've grown up and, elder now, so, I've been pretty well attached to who I am and what I've done and the things that I've done when I've been all over the world. I have memories of a lot of things that I've done, and one of the memories I've got is in Fort Worth. I was a commanding officer of one of the reserve units there. I had a good team, and there were 2 or 3 different reserve units there. And I had one of them. So in Fort Worth, Texas, just west of downtown Fort Worth. And I'll never forget one time one of my members there. He got involved in the program we had. We were having a big program, and I don't know, he was kind of in charge of it, but he wanted me to kind of step up and so I kind of helped him get it put together and so forth. And the people that came in from Hollywood, actors, men, and one lady, and I can't remember the name of the lady. I've seen a picture of her with John Wayne, and I can't remember what her name was. But that happened one night, and it was in Fort Worth, Texas. It was at night, and we had a big program. I remember all that. I'll talk about that. So that was very interesting to me. Yeah. And my sister and I, when she got old enough to go to school, and I was about 2.5 years older than she was, so we'd walk to school. I'd bring her, and she was in the first grade, and of course I was in 2 or 3 grades higher, and we'd walk. At that time, we could walk to school because it wasn't real close by. It was close enough to be able to talk. To walk, But she was she went with me, and I'd take her to school. I remember this vision of taking her to school with me, But she found an old boy, and they married, and she went out to California, and she's been out there ever since. Once she went out there, I used to go see her, and I brought her back, and her husband and so forth, But she spent a lot of time in California, more time, So I was separated from her many years ago. So she was in California, and I've been in California in the Navy. I've been all over California. The shipyard up in San Francisco. When I came back from the West Coast, I've been in Japan, Tokyo, all over there, with a ship. And so I was on a ship, aircraft carrier, and so I've been in a lot of different places. Well, she married this old boy, and they split. It's been a long time ago, but they split. I hate to say this, but he was no good. He drank too much, and I think they finally divorced. I don't have names of who she worked for, but they split, and she married this old boy, and he was quite a bit older than she. And they came, and I came to Fort Worth or wherever I lived at the time, and they spent a day or two with us, with my wife and I. That's one of the last times I think I saw my sister. I can't remember all the visions of course she lived in California. She stayed out there, and she was away from, and I didn't see her. I stayed in touch with her, and I would call her all the time, So I missed her, and I just did not like the idea of her being in California. I don't have a vision of California being real good anymore. Yeah. Especially Gavin Newsom. What's his aunt's? Nancy Pelosi?
Might as well be.
I don't have any use for them. Bad people. Well, bad. They're not bad, but they're not my political vision. I went to high school in downtown Dallas, and I would either ride the bus, or many times I'd ride with my dad, and he had a good job. He was CPA at that time. So sometimes I'd ride with him, and he'd let me off in the corner, and I could drive. I could walk a block to my school. I went to N.R. Crozier Technical High School, and it was a technical high school. People would come from all over Dallas, Oak Cliff, in South Dallas. So they'd come up to the high school there in downtown Dallas. Girls would become hairstylists. If a boy wanted to be a mechanic, whatever things that they wanted to do, it was technical. It was all technical. If they didn't want to go to college, then they would learn something, and that'd be their lifetime. But I didn't follow that. I was always going to go to 4-year school, college. That's what I did. When I graduated out of high school, middle of downtown Dallas, and the building is still there. And then I went to junior college, finished up there. I went to Arlington State College for 2 years. And after that, I went straight down to the University of Texas in Austin. That's where I graduated. I was a geologist. Yeah. Well, my focus in learning geology was earth, rocks, etc. What was down below the surface? What'd you have to drill through? Rocks, all kinds of rocks. We'd pass samples of earths and rocks, tell us what it is, tell us all about it, and that's how we had to understand geology of rocks and what you drill through, because you had to know all the rocks and so forth, all the earth and so forth. Yeah, I drill wells, or I helped. What I'd do is I would sample. I wouldn't be up on the deck of where they were drilling, but I could tell them, because I went and picked up samples. When they drill, when you drill a well, you're bringing up earth, from down below, and I was sampling all that. I was trying to tell what the rocks were, and I'd go out and sample, because we had a lot of sample coming out of the ground, and I could separate all that. Yeah, I would analyze the earth, how far down they were, how deep they were when they finally struck the oil. I was not actually drilling. The driller, the guy who was drilling, he was doing that. I'd be in a little trailer, and that's where I'd spend all day long, analyzing the samples and so forth. I'll never forget when I finally realized. You knew you were getting real close to oil. You could smell it coming out. I'd go out and pick the samples. I'd go up and tell the driller. I said, we're about to hit it. So when you hit it, you got to shut it down. You remember in the old days when you drilled and you hit oil all of a sudden, pew! Well, we didn't do it anymore, because that's wasting the oil. You could shut it down. And you had a way to shut it down. Once you hit it, and it's in pressure. Once you hit it, it's in pressure. Way down in the ground somewhere, So you have to cut it down and control it. You have to control it. Otherwise, it just sprays all over the place. I was my geologist. I was a geologist, So when I went to active duty, went overseas and was on the ship and so forth, came back, and I decided that I was not going to be. I didn't want to be on the ship for the rest of my life, because I had family. At times, I'd be a year away from my family. My wife and we were having some kids. I had 2 children, boy and a girl. So anyway, I came back, got off the ship, and I was commanding officer of the reserve units in Fort Worth there. I did that for a long time, and also Texaco was the company that you remember. Texaco. Texaco is no longer. You know that, right? Texaco was sued big time. And I left them 2 years before the big suit happened. But when they got sued 2 years after, I left them, because I decided I do not like them. I didn't like their manners. I didn't like what they were doing. And it was just the company. I just did not like them. I wasn't doing as well as I thought I should be with the company. And I had a lot of friends with Texaco, but I decided to leave them. And when I left them, and I had service stations, Fort Worth, Texas. I was in charge of all the service stations. We'd find people to run service stations to sell the Texaco oil and gas and the things that Texaco had to sell. And that's what I did for about 12, 14, 15 years. This was my first job after I got off active duty in the Navy. I came back, I worked for Texaco. But after about 15, 16 years with Texaco, I decided I am not retiring with this company because I didn't like them. When they got sued, they're gone. They were gone. There is Texaco. You'll see service stations out there now, right? It says Texaco. That's not Inc. That's not Texaco Inc. Texaco Inc. is no longer even thought of it. So, and I learned not to like them. Well, I had to make money. Right. So what I did, and they didn't like it. So when I left, they said, "What are you going to do? You're going to starve to death if you're leaving us." I said, "Well, I'll work something out." I wasn't going to tell them exactly what I was doing. I bought service stations. I ran them myself. I had 3 service stations, and they didn't necessarily like that because I wasn't supposed to do that if you were working with them, to go and take service stations. They didn't necessarily like that. So I had 3 service stations, and all I wanted to do was make the money to get along, And my real thought was, I said, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life, because it's kind of hard work. And I tell you what, you'd have to work at night, early morning, you had to work because you had to keep that station open. It had to be selling the Texaco products, gasoline, And I had service stations, But that's what I did. I bought 3 stations. But what I was doing was, I said, there's got to be there's something else I'm really more interested in. So I went into insurance. You know what insurance is all about? It's big. Anything you own, car, house, you want to go to college, mothers and grandmothers and parents and so forth, they want to set their children up for college. Well, I sold them college, set up for college. And when you get old enough to get into college, this is your setup. That's what I did, policies. I did that. I sold a whole ton of policies. And as well as insured cars. I mean, can you imagine the cars I was insuring and the houses? I had some pretty good sized buildings around Dallas, in downtown Dallas. I had a guy that he was a wine distributor, and he'd go to Europe. He'd buy wine from somewhere over there, you know where it is, Right. And he got real big at that. So I was insuring his building. He was a good friend of mine, and I met him through church and so forth. So he was a good friend of mine for a long, long time. I learned I was not going to work for Texaco very much longer because I didn't like them. I thought they were bad. Well, it wasn't bad per se, but they thought they were really way up. They thought they were a worse problem I could say was they thought they were assholes, and that's what I consider them. I didn't like them, so I left them. But I did get 3 service stations because I knew how to run service stations. Because I ran service stations all over Fort Worth, north, on the border, I mean, I had a lot of service stations. I had people that worked for me, and we would find people, train them, and they would actually run the service stations, and they made good money. Running service stations is quite a bit, selling gasoline and working cars, with oil and putting oil in cars, so that's big money. That's what I did with 3 stations. I knew what insurance was all about, and you got to have insurance for your house, for cars, for going to college. Insurance was big. It was big in those days. It still is. Parents have to put their kids in college. And how do you do that? Well, you have money to be able to send them to college for 3, 4, 5 years, or higher. And so that takes money to seek the training and then come out and and make money. That's all I did was in church. Once a year, I would drive to California and pick up a ship for about 2 weeks. I did that for a long, long time because I stayed with the Navy, and in order to stay with the Navy, I retired with the Navy. I'm a full bird colonel. The rank of a colonel is captain. I was a captain in the Navy. Yeah, I loved it.
That off
Okay.
for us.
Okay. My captain. Well, I spent a long time in the Navy. I was all over. I never got into Europe. I went all over the West, Tokyo, Philippine Islands, anyway, all over there. Army ROTC, 4 years of high school, and then I had 2 years of ROTC, 2 years in junior college, in Arlington State College, which is now the University of Texas in Arlington. And then after 2 years in Arlington State College, and I had a choice of either going to University of Texas or A&M. I did not go to A&M. I wanted to go to the University of Texas in Austin, and that's where I went. That's where I graduated. After I drilled wells in Mississippi, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Houston. I drilled about 3 wells that I remember, so forth. And then I went in the Navy. I had already graduated and had already been doing some drilling, working with the people drilling wells, so And then I went active duty with the Navy. It was either 51, 52, 53, something like that, And then got hooked up with the Navy and went to the West Coast and had to get shots and all that. So it took about a week to get that. And my aunt was a nurse out there, so I was with her for about 3 or 4 days, not quite a week, And then I got on a plane and flew straight to Tokyo. That's when I went active with the Navy. I was pretty close to Tokyo. When I flew over there, I had to wait for the ship to come in. Ship was out. I was on the USS Essex, CVA-9. It was a teak wood flight deck, but it was all wood, teak wood flight deck, But I flew over there once I got all set up. Then I was over there, and I found my ship. The ship came in. It came into pretty close to Tokyo, somewhere over there, Can't remember all the ports. I'm having trouble remembering all the ports. I was all over that. I can look on the map, and I can find some of the ports that I've seen, that I've been into while I was on the ship. Because on the ship, I went to Philippine Islands, and I'm all over there, back up to Tokyo, and all over there. So I saw quite a bit of the West. Well, we'd go into Olongapo. That was the port. We'd come from Japan, come down there. One day, a couple of the people on the ship, they were pilots. They had wings, and they'd from time to time would go fly. They'd fly on the ship because they had pilot. They were a pilot. Had pilot training. So I went with 2 of them. And seemed like there's two or three other people that went with me. Anyway, it was a 2-engine plane, and we were there for just a very few days. Might have been 3 or 4 days, and then came back to Olongapo. Came back to the ship. The ship stayed there. I loved it. Oh God, yeah. Teakwood flight deck. It was a aircraft carrier, USS Essex, World War II, and it got damaged. But I was aboard that ship for about a year and a half or so. And I came back to the United States. And when I came back, we had to go to the shipyard in San Francisco to repair the teakwood deck, USS Essex. It was a nice ship. I was head of a unit there. I had a small group of about 30 people, roughly, and I was head of that little unit, and we had we were in charge of the two weapons on the back end of the ship, and we had quite a bit of cannons on that ship, We had two in the back, on the very back of the ship, and we had several cannons. We had the shooting availability all around that ship. We had a lot of weapons. I had the two weapons in the back. I would have duty at least once per day. And it was a 4-hour duty, and I would go up and I would run the ship. I'd be up, and part of the ship where you're running the ship on a carrier, and you got a lot of people up there running the ship. And if you're the commanding officer, as an officer, and you stand real close to the captain, and he was a full Navy captain, and he's got his chair there, and he sits there and he watches, because he's the captain of the ship. But when you're on duty for 4 hours, and it matters no what, because I would have duty at night, early in the morning, during the day, early in the morning, or afternoon, or whatever. But I would have a 4-hour duty, and it would be my time to go up there and run the ship behind the captain, right behind y'all. And I'll never forget, one day we were launching, but at the time I have this distinct remember. At the time we were landing jets. It was a single seat jet, and this jet, it landed. You'd launch in the front, and you'd recover on the back. And that ship is long. There's a lot of space there to be able to launch and land at the same time. So at the time we were landing jets, single pilot jets, and that jet came in, single engine jet, came in, landed okay, right? I was standing behind the captain, and I looked down there, and it had disengaged. It already picked up the hook. It had already stopped, and it was running, So it was running over there down. I was standing way up above it, looking down, And I said, Captain, look at the wheels on that jet. Those wheels are they're smoking. Basically, they were on fire. Why they were on fire, I don't know. But the pilot had it disengaged, and the plane was moving too close to the edge, and it wasn't stopped. It was kept moving, and the wheels, the front wheels of that jet were kind of smoking. So I said, Captain, do you see what I'm seeing? He said, yeah. He says, do you know what to do? I said, yes, sir, I do. So what I did was, once the plane got there, I looked at it, I looked at the captain, and the next thing the plane went like that and down. He said, you know what to do? I said, yes, sir, I do. So I had to stop the port engine. We didn't want to run over the plane in the water, because it was just floating. By that time, it had fallen in the water, So I had to stop the ship, Wow. I had to bark out all, And you bark out, you don't do anything. You don't handle anything. You just bark it out. And that's what I did. I had dinner with him about 2 or 3 days later. So I asked him, I said, and I knew him. I said, well, I guess you were really excited when you were in that ship. I mean, on the jet you were in. So I said, he went upside down, and he fell in. Yeah, went upside down, And I said he had to go down pretty deep. You had to get out of that plane, and you had to eject out of the plane, and you take it straight down, Put you straight down into the water. So I said, were you a little confused, or were you scared? Or so? He said, yeah. I said, well, how'd you find the surface to get back to the top of the water? He looked at me. He says, it's easy. Follow the bubbles. I said, boy, that's a good idea. Follow the bubbles. That's how he got back out. And I had lunch with him later on that night in the wardroom on the ship there. He was very interesting, But we saved him.
That's fantastic.
We took the plane out. We took the plane out. We had equipment to take it out of the water and pick it back up on the plane. We took it home. Yeah, we recovered the plane, the pilot, and the whole nine. So,
Wow.
but I was on duty at that time. That's when I had to maneuver the ship to get the ship. We didn't want to run over it, So we got the plane out, and that was my. And I've told that experience very, very many times. Well, I ranked up to a full Navy captain, same as a bird colonel. But I was on that ship for pretty close to 2 years. I took it from my home port was San Diego. When it came back from Japan and all over from the west way over there, we'd have to stop in Hawaii, and we had nukes, so we had to disload. We had to unload the nukes in Hawaii. We didn't bring them back to the United States. And same way, if we'd go on about a 6 month tour somewhere else in the world, you'd have to go and pick up the nukes, put them on the ship, and then go out and do your tour for about maybe 4, 5, 6 months. My grandson, I got him into the Naval Academy, and he graduated from there, and he is now a Navy commander, which is one rank below a captain, and he has become the second in charge of the Navy's Blue Angel program. And you know what they do, right?
Oh, yes.
They go around the United States, and I have seen them I've worked with a lot of the pilots, and I've known quite a few, And he has headed up that, and his the base where the Blue Angels are stationed at is in Pensacola, Florida. And I've been there, and I went over there to see one of my grandsons, and he wanted to be a doctor. Well, he's got two brothers, his dad, and my daughter, his mother, is a high nurse, and so that's where he went to school. My wife, from Alexandria, Egypt, man, she loved gambling. She loved it. And I guess she must have picked it up from her family, etc., in Alexandria, Egypt. But I have never even thought of myself even thinking about being gambling. That's never energized me at all, to spend money to try to gamble and make more money. Because the way I look at it, if you're gambling, sooner or later, you'll lose money. One way or the other, you'll lose money. So that's why I never began to gamble. So I would tell my wife, I said, well, honey, I says, if you run out of money, I said, I'll give you $20 or so, But I said, I'm gonna give you much because I don't believe in gambling money. I won't gamble. I never have. I've never gambled. And so I'd give her money. And when she run out of money, I said, well, that's all I'm gonna give you. So she'd have to work something else. But she was a good lady, but she loved to gamble, So I left her there to gamble, and I drove my car over to see my one of my grandchildren, and he was in school. He wanted to be a doctor, but at first I tried to get him into the Naval Academy, and they said we're not going to take him because we don't train doctors, and he wanted to be a doctor. So I said, well, okay, let me tell you. So I told him, I said, you go back and tell them you want to be in the Navy, and for them to put you in the Navy, but you want to be a doctor, and that it worked. So he became a doctor, courtesy U.S. Navy, and he's a full doctor today, as his brothers are, and his dad, and so forth, So he became a doctor.
Interesting.
So that's what I did. I helped him become a doctor. And he got on a ship, and he was on a ship he went to Japan on a ship. That was his active duty, being on a ship. And then he came back, then he finished his doctorate, he's a full doctor now. My daughter had 4 boys, and 2 boys are full doctors now. And the youngest one is going to be a doctor in another year and a half, So my daughter's name is Kathy. She lives in Temple, Texas. You know what Temple is, below Waco? That's where it is. And so it's a doctor family.
Wow.
Doctor family. And she's a high degree nurse. Went to school. I put her in school to be a nurse, And she married an old boy that he became a doctor. That's what he wanted to do. When they married, he was with a company called Lilly, Lill, okay. And so he left them and went to school, became a doctor. And they had kids, and one of them, third boy, wanted to be a doctor, but he had a problem. I can't imagine what happened to him, but he was in Austin in med school, and they had to go down and pick him up, bring him home. He just flat lost it. He was overwhelmed in what he was trying to do to be a doctor and so forth, So they had to bring him home, take him home, get him out of his apartment, bring him home, and he's home today. And he's kind of worked out of it. But it destroyed him as to what he wanted to do, and so but he was just overwhelmed with, I guess, what was on him right now. What was his problem. So he couldn't think. He lost it.
Wow.
That happens. But I can imagine how that would overwhelm you to be in school and trying to learn to be a doctor and so forth, and trying to pass, be smart enough to go through the classes, so we don't. But it destroyed him. I mean, he had to come home. They brought him home, and he was out of it for a long time. But he's kind of worked out it now. But he's got a job now. He's doing quite well for himself. My mother taught me how to dance. Can you remember back in those days? There was jitterbug and some other things, but there's something my mother taught me, and I was excellent at that. And I taught a lot of people how to do that. I was a dancer. And when I was growing up, as a kid, I was on lots of little plays. When little boys and girls were working in plays, and so and I was involved in that. Well, I've always been real good at just with my feet. I can dance. I still can, but I don't do much anymore. Now I have a stepdaughter. I've been married twice, and my second wife, she was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and she came here when she was in her mid-20s, and she had one daughter, and her daughter lives right down the street from me right now. Her name is Christy, and Christy has a daughter, she's 29 right now, and a son that's 25 or 26, and they live right down the street there. I see her all the time, and she takes me. She took me to get some stuff done, and I got a lot of stuff on my face. But she's my stepdaughter, and she's very close to me. And my daughter and my son, they're my children. My son and my son's one of his oldest boy is in the Naval Academy. He's in charge of the Blue Angels right now.
Right.
Okay, that's what he did.
Okay.
And his name is Chris.
Okay.
Chris Meek. My wife and I were married in the Saints Constantine and Helen Orthodox. She was Orthodox. And we were married there. We bought another church, and it's a beautiful church. And it's got a dome on it, and so and it's the Saints Constantine and Helen Orthodox Church, and it's not too far from here. And that's where I go. Since I don't have a car anymore to drive over there, I've reached out to somebody that might live close by here, or close to where I could go to the church, but I haven't been able to connect with this. Now I've talked to several preachers. We have 3 or 4 preachers. We've got 2 preachers there that are from another country, but they're our preachers and our head preacher. So but I can't find anybody that I can point out. And I've reached out, and one guy said, "Well, I can come get you every once in a while, but not all the time." So and I understand that. So I've been going with my daughter, Christy's oldest daughter, and she takes me to her church, and it's very interesting. It's totally different from the church that my wife and I were buried in. Very, very different. It's called Sojourn, Sojourn. It's a big church. It's a big church, but it's very different. Okay, when you walk in there, they're open, and the room is kind of dark, and they're singing. And you stand and sing and stand and sing, and you sing and sing and sing. It only lasts about 4 hours. Now, our church, St. Constantine and Helen, it lasts 4 hours. That's a long time to stand up and sit down and stand up and sit down, And by the time it gets noon, they have food and so, But 4 hours in that church, and it gets very boring, very boring. St. Constantine and Helen, it's too long, way too long. Well, I'm taking advantage of this time that I go with her, and we go out to lunch after we finish church. I take her to lunch all the time, But she's a very nice. I'm not her father, I'm her stepfather, So, and Christy is my stepdaughter, but Christy was my wife's only daughter. I was my wife's fourth husband, and she was born in Alexandria, Egypt, and was married, or at the best I know from what I've been able to get from my wife, is that the one husband that she had, first husband, apparently didn't work too well. I think she dropped him and divorced him. And she met somebody that came from Texas, just north of here, Gainesville. You know where Gainesville is? He's from there. But he finished his degree. He had a PhD. But they met. My wife met him over there in Alexandria, and she was working for a bank, and it was another language, and I can't remember where the country was. Just south of Alexandria, Egypt, the big country there. But and that's where she met this guy, and he was her second husband. After she got away from the first husband, she didn't like him, I guess. Something happened, I don't know anything about it, but I was my wife's fourth husband. And I've got a daughter that lives in Temple, My daughter lives down in, and Byron, my son. They're also very close to me. But they're my real children. But Christy is not my birth child. Christy's got a daughter, so she's 29 now, and she's got a son. She's got a son that's 25 or 26. And last July of last year, I took them down to the Grand Caymans. They're English, and they're below Cuba. Oh, by the way, I've been to Cuba. I was on the admiral's staff on the East Coast. I was there for about almost 2 years. So I was on his staff. I used to take his messages with him. Let him read them early in the morning. I would take his messages. I'd get messages. I was on his communications staff. There's 3 steps of admiral to be up to the top admiral, and he was up at number 3. I remember his mother lived with him, and at that time I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and my office was there in that admiral's staff there, on his staff, and I flew with him down to Guantanamo. Guantanamo in Cuba is been with the United States for years and years and years, long time, On that land is a big Navy base. I went with the admiral down there, and I did some stuff for him, and finished it up to me. And we flew down with the admiral. It was less than a week, 3, 4, or 5 days, something like that, So I went with the admiral down there, and he came back to Norfolk, Virginia. But he was very good. He was a very good admiral. I liked being with him. So I was with him for quite some time, and I liked him. He was very good. But to my knowledge, I don't think he had ever been married. His mother lived with him in a nice house there on the base there in close to Norfolk, Virginia, or right there in Norfolk, Virginia. Because when I was up there, I just rented a house, my wife and I think I had a young son. Byron, I think, was young at the time. I think he was very, very young. The timeshare is below Cuba. I used to have three. I'm down to one. And you only need one. And it's in Grand Cayman. It's the big island. There's two other islands a little bit further east, about 60 or 70 miles. Two of them there. And then Grand Cayman's right there. And it's just below Havana. Yeah, it's just below there, And I've been going down there. I've owned that property for years, at least 35 or more years. I used to have three, and I gave two away. And I could have sold them, but they were always, selling more timeshares. And so I couldn't compete with them, so I just gave them away. And one lady, I know her, she lives in Florida, and friends, I see them from Florida. I see them in the Grand Caymans once a year. Nice people. And this other guy he and I were on city council before. I was on city council here in Highland Village for a long time. So anyway, I told him, I says, you want it? I said, I'll give it to you. I said, I'm not going to charge you for it, I could probably gotten a couple of $1,000s for it, for timeshares, can be sold, And I just gave it to him. And the thing I realized about him is he never expressed any thankfulness about me giving it to him free. He never said anything about it. So since that time, I don't care for him off. I don't care for him. But I told Byron, my son, I said, Byron, keep this timeshare. I want you to keep it for the family, for them to go down and use it. Go down to Grand Cayman and use it. Go down and see it. But the longer you have it, the more you have to pay. In order to keep the timeshare, you have to pay for it. And the cost keeps going up. My payment for this one timeshare, and I've only got, it's a whole week, whole 7 days, It's expensive, and it goes up every year. And next year it'll go up, keep going up, But I want to keep it because I'm locked into it. As long as I pay for it, I'm locked into it. The cost to go there is, first of all, flight. I took two kids, and there were three of us. We went down there last year in July, and I go straight down there and straight back. Dallas, Grand Cayman, back. And I don't want to go to Florida. I tried going to Florida, and then jumping off down in there. Man, I missed the flight, and I had to wait for the next morning. I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. So I get on the plane in Dallas, come back to Dallas, And, to take myself and my two grandkids was, it was about $1,700, $1,800. Flying down there and back, it ain't cheap. I like to take my people,
Right.
So, and I'm going there. Byron, my son, is going with me, and his wife. Chris Meek is the fellow that I put in the Naval Academy. That's one of Byron's sons, and the other son is he's in Colorado, and so he's bringing his son and the son's wife. I mean, I'm taking Byron and his wife, so and that's why I've kept that timeshare. But it's beautiful. It's an English colony, So, if you've ever been to England, that's the way you drive in the Grand Caymans. It's on the left side of the road.
Yeah.
Better stay on the right side, and on the left side of the road, not the right, on the left. Especially when you do those roundabouts, so say, okay, now go this way or this way. Stay left. I was on city council. If you're the mayor, you're head of the council, and there's I think, including the mayor, there's 5 people that head the council. I was one of, not the mayor, I was under the mayor. And the mayor, I can't remember who the mayor was at the time, but Charlotte Wilcox, you know her. She's now the mayor for the 3rd time, and I know her quite well. I know her and her husband quite well. Her husband came over here one day years ago. I had a bee swarming. You know what a bee swarm is?
Yes.
You know how bee swarms occur? One queen bee takes all of her family and goes somewhere else. Because two queen bees cannot work together. So they take all theirs and go someplace else. So at that time, the queen bee came and parked in my house there, up in the attic, and I had to call Charlotte. She said, "Well, my husband does bees." Well, I knew all about bees because my dad and I had bees for a long, long time. We had lots and lots of houses of bees because we had a farm up north of here, So I called Charlotte, and she sent her husband came over and took the bees. And my dad and I we used to have several. We had them up on our farm up right outside of Whitesboro, and we had 15 or 20 houses of bees. Oh, we sold honey. Yeah. Man, I used to love honey. But I'll tell you what. One day I was up in our farm, and I was going inside because they were swarming around. My dad was out there working the bees, and he had to have a hat and a place. He had something around his eyes, his head, and so they wouldn't sting you. When you're messing around bees, you're interrupting them, right. And they get a little mad, and they will sting. So I was outside when I was helping my dad. I was trying to stay away from bees and not get stung, because we're flying around, and bees will sting you. If you're there, they'll hit you. They'll sting you. So as I was going into the house, and at that time it was a house that my dad's sister, I think it was, and her husband were living there. We don't have that house there now anymore, and in fact, we don't have the property. All we've got is an oil well, I drill a well, and we've still got oil coming up out of that area, and so not much oil anymore. It goes down, So, but anyway, that's what we had. And the city was Highland Village. And Highland Village is very small compared to Louisville. Louisville, Texas, is quite large, in population. But Highland Village, right here on the lake, and it's not very big. We've got about 18,000 people. That's about all, But Louisville is a pretty good size little town. Louisville is. But I was on city council for Highland Village, and I was one of, I think, 5 people that were on city council, and the mayor. And I was elected, and I was on it for about 8 years, maybe 9, something like that, But it was very interesting, very interesting. It's the city council is what it is. I mean, whatever you do, that's what we did. You have to take care of the laws and streets, and things that have to be done for the city, for the streets and for the activities and so forth, So that's what we did at city council. I made money because I knew what insurance was all about, and that was a good way to earn a living. You got to have insurance for cars and buildings, your houses, and all this, and go to college, and so there's so much you can use that takes money to save. You sold it to families, could be to grandparents, to parents of children, and so forth, but they had to be able to take care of the what they need to do. Yeah, I like politics. I've never been elected other than on city council, but I've never actually never had a real desire to be elected to state rep. And I know Tan Parker. I've known him since he was in office. I like Tan. I've known a lot of people that elected, but I've never actually wanted to go to Congress. I just didn't think that was my fit. And it would have been fun. I think Donald John Trump, in my estimation, I think he is the smartest, best president we've had to date. Now, a lot of people will argue about this, Well, I love America. I actually think that Texas has a very interesting spot in the United States. And I am proud to say I think Texas is the best state to be in. I really do. It's bigger, it's better, and I don't like to even comment about California, but I have no use for Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, or anybody else in California. I've been in California. I was there in the Navy, been in the shipyard up north. But I think Gavin Newsom is. I'll stop saying. I don't like him. The people in Texas, and it's very surprising about the people in the city, in Texas and so forth. There are some people here that Joe Biden allowed people to come in. I think Joe Biden was absolutely the most stupid person I've ever seen in my life. He's stupid. He should never have been president. He should never have been president. Nor should Kamala Harris been his vice president. Kamala Harris. BS. Don't like her. Don't care for her. Don't like people like that. People like that do not need to be elected to be VP or whatever. They don't have the sense. When Kamala Harris was trying to be the president after Joe Biden, I just said to myself, no way, no how. She ought to go to Hollywood and sit there and be there, because that's what she needs to do. She needed to be in Hollywood, because that's who she was. She was not a president, no way, or a VP, or a vice president. And I've got real thoughts about that. Did not like them. That's my politics. I don't like people like that. They don't need to be in politics. They're two-sided. They get themselves into trouble, and they get our state in trouble. And we don't need that in Texas. We don't need that in Texas at all. It's not good. Not good. It's not good for us. Not good for the citizens. The citizens, I think, that want to take care of this state, Texas. That's the way I feel. I would just simply say, you have to, whatever you do, you have to be sure that we're following all the rules and don't do some of these things that I see happen that people do that really bothers me to no end. Like, who was the VP under Kamala? Waltz? BS. Bullshit. And he thinks he's the greatest guy there ever was. He's not. People like that need to be divided or whatever, but don't elect those SOBs to a seat. They don't belong there and should never be there. They're going the wrong way. Going wrong. And that's what bothers me. That bothers me an awful lot about people that I see that are trying to run this country. And with a single person like myself, what am I going to do with it? I can't do anything about it, because I'm not elected, so. But I've got real opinions about people that are trying to get those seats, get elected, and so. And I can form a very, very big opinion. I can form my opinion about, are they good for us or not? And I can always form an opinion real quick. Once I know who they are, I don't like them. Get them out. Keep them out as long as we can. I have a feel what I know needs to be running this state, this country, or if it's a city or whatever it is, whatever they're doing. I've got an opinion. But I have an opinion how I feel what they're doing and how well they're doing it. It's got to be on the straight and narrow. You got to be straightforward and on the straight and the best you can for this country, for this whatever you're doing. If you're running something, a city or a company or whatever, do it well. Don't do tricks. I'm going to straight and narrow. Straight and narrow, be honest. Totally honest. Follow the law, follow the rules, so forth. And if you do anything to distrust somebody or doing something that you know is wrong, don't do it. That's the way I feel about it. I'm very, very strong about being honest and helping people. If you can't help people, I don't think you're worth it. Get them out, quick. disengage them. Disengage. That's the way I feel about it. Well, if they're going to be elected and they're in charge or they're running an important part, they've got to be honest. They got to be straight and don't do anything that's wrong and help people. My idea is I'm always saying I need you to help people to go straight and run your business and so forth and help people. Help people. If people need money, I give them money. I did it for the right reasons, to help them to do what they needed to do. So that's how I've tried to help people. That's my philosophy. Help them if I can. Help them if I can. If I've got the money, maybe I don't give them a lot of money, but I'll give them along to push them down the road. That's what I've always done, and I think it's the best thing to do. So that's me. I'd like to be remembered for the things that I've done, maybe some of the things I've done, and if I've been elected or if I've just been around and so forth. But people know me, and if they know who I am and what I've done, and so forth, I want to be remembered for the good things that I've done. I don't want to be done for anything that I've done bad or done worse than I should have been doing, because I don't want to do. I'm against anything like that at all. I want to be as good as I can, because I know at the very end, and I talk to a lot of people about this, at the very end, where do I want to go? This way and not this way. Right. That's what I tell them. So this is the way I'm going, and I'm trying to set that path in the right way. That's who I am. Well, I want my family, because I'm very proud of my daughter and what she's done with the 4 boys and being doctors and so forth, And I want this country to be straight. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the reason I like politics, because I do look at the people that are being elected, and I like Donald John Trump. I like him very well, and a lot of people don't like him, and a lot of people are talking about him. And one of the things I shouldn't do is, if I go to church, and I should not get into politics at a church, but sometimes I'll bark out. I really will. I shouldn't do it, and you shouldn't do things like in church. In church, it's a good life. You need to be straight and honest and talk about godly things, not politics. And I have a lot of people say, "Well, I'm not going to talk politics." I say, "Okay, I'm going to talk." A lot of people don't want to talk politics, especially in church. And I should not even bother to do this in church. But I'm a person. I got opinions, and I'm pretty strong about that. So I try to stay away from it, because I don't want to think that people think that that's all I think about is. But I'm concerned about our country, about things that are right. I want things to be right, straight up and level, to help anybody that can stay on the level right. That's what I want. I'll help them if that's necessary. I'll help them. And over my long life and what I've seen so young, I've known some of the mistakes I've made so young, and I'm trying to straighten all of it out before I'm at the end. That's what I want to do. That's exactly what I want to do. Get it right. That's why I'm very concerned about anybody that I think needs attention, or needs to be straightened out, or leveled back to straight up. I'm pointing them in the right direction. I think that's the only way to do it. That's the best way, and the only way. That's who I am.